I still want to get better at painting, specifically with acrylic painting, but I'm going to be working with a couple of other mediums as well. The plan this time around is I'm going to focus a week around getting better at concept art. So I sketched 4 different sketches at the beginning of the week, 3 smaller ones, and then a larger main composition. They are very loosely based in the same universe. So essentially I'm going to be spending the beginning of the week trying to prepare to paint those concept images. So feel free to grab your own materials and paint or sketch along with me if you'd like. Let's get started. The first day I decided to use as a warm-up day. So I started off by doing a timed gesture drawing session. I do these off of a channel on YouTube called New Masters Academy. Essentially, there are videos that you can follow that have a selection of images that are timed for 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute, and 10-minute poses. And I really love starting a day off with these because I feel like it really helps loosen up the hand and encourages you to just kind of let go of some of the perfectionism, something that I definitely struggle with in art and in life, to be honest, is that I obsess over details. So I found that doing these timed gesture sessions really helps me a lot with that because you really just gotta get everything down on the page without overthinking it too much. I almost always use Vine charcoal for time drawing because it is a very quick medium. However, I will say it is quite difficult to use Vine charcoal at a small scale, which naturally is exactly what I'm doing. As always, some of these are definitely more successful than others, and that's kind of the point. The other thing that I wanted to accomplish on this warm-up day is to test these new acrylic paint markers that were very kindly sent to me by Arrtx. I have been wanting to try acrylic paint markers for so long because acrylic is my main medium. So this was super exciting for me. Arrtx sent me 2 different sets of their acrylic markers, the Simptap 24 saturated color set and their 30 color acrylic marker set. The Simptap are more like a standard acrylic marker where you press the end of the marker to release the paint so that you can use it. The 30 color set has no pressing. You just go ahead and use them as is, which is super convenient. So to test these, I decided to create some simple character designs from a couple of the poses that I did in the gesture drawing session. Of course, I had to make this more difficult for myself.
Your future is full of struggle and anguish, most of it self-inflicted.
Every day, my favorite quote from Avatar just gets more and more relevant. I'm going to decide the color palette by picking 4 markers without looking. I'm starting off with the 30 set of markers and I'm just mixing them all up so I can pick out 4 with my eyes closed to be the color palette. Oh, interesting. These are the 4 that I ended up with. Not what I was expecting. Let's see what we can do with this. I tend to start out with whatever is kind of a middle toned color, and then from there I can work with some of the highlights and shadows from the other colors that are darker and lighter. I started to build out the shadows with purple and later the black. I added a few little character story elements, not super complicated, keeping it relatively simple. And then the yellow ended up being more of a highlight color. And then we're going to do the same thing with the Simptap set. These are the 4. Oh. Oh no, not what I would have chosen. That's pretty much exactly what this challenge is for. So let's give it a shot. Overall, I absolutely love the Arrtx markers. Although I have nothing to really compare these to, I do think they are really great quality. They are pretty opaque. I would honestly say that they're even more opaque than a lot of acrylic paints that I use. Some of the lighter colors like yellow are a little bit harder to layer on top of a darker color, but overall, I was very impressed with them. I absolutely love that they have a brush tip, so you can get some really great line variation, and this really helps to be able to go and get small details as well. I will say that depending on the set that you get, they don't have all of the colors that you might necessarily want. For example, the 30 set of markers doesn't have an orange in it and could definitely use a few more browns in my opinion, but there are a lot of different sets of markers. For me, between the 2 sets of markers, I ended up having a decent selection of colors, which was great. I originally was like, what am I gonna do with this color palette? But the red and the vibrant purple color really ended up working quite nicely together, which I was not expecting at the beginning. I did also get a silver. It was super nice for some really subtle decorative details and some of the jewelry parts, things like that. I'll be using the Arrtx markers more throughout the week, but just from this initial test, I feel like they have quickly become a favorite material of mine. For day 2, we are focusing on nature. I mainly wanted to study and capture how light interacts with trees. So do I need to tell you we're painting a tree? This one had some really beautiful elements and I just really loved the lighting and colors on it. Our most recent Patreon project challenge was out of your comfort zone. So everyone's been trying some new materials, new things, and trying to step out of what they usually make. And we've had some really super cool projects. It's difficult, but I absolutely think it is so important to step out of your comfort zone once in a while and use a new material, a different color palette, or just do something you feel unsure about, because regardless of the results, it encourages new pathways of thinking and can help you in your normal practice. I know it might not seem like it because I do choose to paint fairly often in videos, but I actually get the most nervous to share any of my painting and drawing. Here's the thing, I can only dedicate a decent amount of time to painting if I do it for a video, but it also terrifies me to put paintings in videos. Story of my life. More so than any other art or craft, I feel like drawing has been my lifelong struggle, and the one thing that I've had to fight harder than anything to get better at. It's definitely not something that has ever come easily or naturally to me, and it's definitely really hard to share things that you feel very unsure about, but I hope there's some benefit to it as well. Perhaps seeing an imperfect process will encourage somebody else to continue in their own work, even if it doesn't go the way you want. After finishing up the tree, the sun was beginning to set, but I still wanted to capture some tall grass and various plants. So I did a quick sketch with some things around the garden and got some shots for reference so that I could head inside and finish up the rest. I'm starting this one off with a wash of green. It can really help to lay a color down so I have places to go with both highlights and shadows. And then, as always with painting, everything is just built up in layers from there with lots of different colors and various types of greenery. The tall grass was a really great place to use the acrylic markers because I could really get all of those different colors to create a nice texture. From there, I wanted to do a study of a bird, so I just found one that I thought was cool and started laying down different blues for it. This is a Stellar's Jay. I didn't really know that much about it, but I thought it was pretty, and I really loved the cute spiky part of its head, so. And then finally, since my main painting at the end is going to be a fall forest scene, I decided to do some fall leaves to try and figure out what colors really work well and how light interacts with them. On day 3, we are focusing on the character that will be in the final painting. So I thought it would be great to start again with some timed gesture sketches to warm up. I definitely noticed that even from the other day, during some of these I got much better at laying things in quickly, which was really nice to see. Some of these dramatic poses really just get me. Then we'll start getting into the actual character. I decided to take some of my own reference for the character. So I pulled out a sheet and an umbrella and got to work. Once I had that to draw my sketch from, I had a few different color variations that I wanted to try out for things like hair color and costume. So before doing the final piece, we're going to create some little thumbnails by painting some sections of orange, which is vaguely what a lot of the environment will be. And then I can test the different colors over it quickly to decide what I want to move forward with in the main design. They're all essentially slightly different variations of the same colors: a royal blue, black, and white. Once I had those, I knew I liked the first one the best, and I went ahead and started the main character design. This one was very nerve-wracking because for once I honestly kind of liked the sketch. So adding color is always a little bit of a gamble. And to be honest, I think I lost money on this one at the end. I love myself a good dramatic flowing cape or cloak or robe. There's nothing better. My concepts are designed around a civilization that reveres the sky. So a lot of their infrastructure is based around birds. They deliver messages, people travel with them. In addition, the writing system is based on constellations. So you'll see that there are a lot of little details that have some type of star patterns on it, like this character's robe. Don't think too much into it because I certainly didn't with this concept, but that is the basic idea. I also ended up lining this sketch later because, well, I just thought it looked bad without it. What more can I say? Overall, I think this got my idea down pretty well, but I wasn't very happy with the lighting, or let's be honest, the lack thereof. For day 4, I wanted to do some studies of some compositions that have similar subject matter, lighting, that I want to include in my final piece as well. So the main one I wanted to do is this fall forest scene. Surprisingly, I don't think I've painted many fall scenes. I'm pretty sure the only one is actually the fall Ghibli cookie tin design. It's kind of surprising because fall has always been my favorite season. It is coming, my friends. I can smell the crunchy leaves underfoot as we speak. It has some of that subtle atmosphere that filters the color in the background. I ended up working from less saturated to more saturated, and building those layers up slowly really started to bring the piece to life. And this really helped me determine the way I needed to think about colors in my final piece. My favorite format to paint is in quite a wide cinematic aspect ratio. Obviously, it depends on the painting, but I found the acrylic markers were so wonderful for this because I could really start to get some of those tiny details in there, and it helped to define more textures, create leaves. I don't want to be dramatic, but I feel like the acrylic markers have kind of changed my art life, and I have absolutely loved working with them. The final touch in this are some falling leaves blowing in the wind. Then we get to the most fun part, taking off the tape that we shall reuse to do another composition sketch. I really loved the lighting in this one, and I wanted to take an opportunity to try out slipping some stepping stones into a piece so I could practice those because they will be in my final piece. This one also has a similar composition to what my final piece will be, so I thought it would be a really good one to study. We're really getting a lot of practice painting trees this week. It's all part of the plan. I also wanted to include some tall grass in this one because, again, we're gonna need that for later. I really loved the golden light in this. It draws your attention to the opening of the forest, and I really don't feel like this one came together until the very end when I used the acrylic markers to add more of a leafy texture in the canopy and defining some of those big masses of color. Moving into day 5, there were a couple of small specific elements that I wanted to start off the day studying. The first thing are some banners blowing in the wind hanging from the trees. This was a very specific reference to look for, so the first thing that I thought of to study for this were prayer flags. I thought these would be really fun to paint because of the colors, and there's lots of great references of them blowing in the wind. I also wanted to paint some mossy rocks because I thought I might add a couple of those to build out the forest. These were particularly tricky for me. The rocks were okay, but once I started to lay that moss in, that texture was really difficult to get right. I was honestly not really liking these at all about halfway through, but if you just keep going, you'll usually get to a point where you are at least somewhat satisfied with something in it. So of course, we're forging on ahead, and I'm just trying to layer lots of different tones of green. Again, this is an instance where the acrylic markers really came in handy to start building up those textures. For some reason at the end, I felt like the rocks could be something from Wind Waker, and I was happy with that. Then I went back to briefly finish the prayer flags, really adding to those shadows and starting to add the slight suggestion of the designs on them. Then we could finally move on to our first concept art piece. I started this one by laying down a teal wash. I really just go for whatever mid-tone color I think will set the tone of the piece well to paint over. So it's a scene with a character jumping from half of a bridge to the other side of a river. Why half a bridge, you ask? Because of course, I wanted the reflection in the water to create a crescent moon. So I said, who needs a full bridge? Certainly not me. Maybe the most difficult part of this one was the water reflections, but actually since I wanted the water to be quite still, it wasn't too bad. I studied reflections a lot in the last painting video that I did, so I do feel like I understand specifically water reflections at least a little bit better now.
There's a horizon disappearing on me, left you behind, and spring will remind me there's nothing left to you except allergies.
I actually think the hardest part for me on this one was the figure. I wanted to have the figure jumping across and also some birds behind it. And I was trying to draw the pose relatively accurate, but also it was very, very small. And I did mess it up quite a few times. But the beauty of acrylic paint is you can just go straight over it and fix it as many times as you want, which in this case was quite a few. At the very end, I went in and added a bunch of lily pads on the water, which I really think gave it that final touch. And I was overall really happy with the color palette and the composition of this one. On day 6, we have our final 2 smaller concept images. So listen, day 6 ended up being 2 days. It's a baker's week. It's fine. So I had 2 smaller concept paintings to finish. In my concept, all messages are delivered via birds. So it's kind of just a small structure with a bunch of compartments with scrolls and messages stored to be carried. I've got to be totally honest with you, I was not super enthusiastic about this composition or this concept as much as the other ones. And let me tell you, that attitude really set the tone for this whole painting. I had some cool lighting that I wanted to do, but I didn't necessarily have the greatest grasp of it. I didn't really practice much for any night lighting, which is what this one was. So I was just severely struggling through this whole piece. I find it very difficult to try and imagine lighting when you don't have a super great reference to work off of, but hey, that's why we're here to work on it. I also think that I went a little bit too far into the blacks on this one as well. I do use black, but I try to use it somewhat sparingly so that we don't dull the whole painting out, and I think I crossed the line on this one, and it kind of took a lot of the life away from the piece. There's something about this one in the end that somehow reminded me of some kind of video game. I'm not sure exactly which one it is, so I'm gonna throw this one to you. Let me know if you think it looks like a certain game. I saved the one that I was most excited about for last, also because I figured it would probably be the hardest. I was in fact mistaken, but I'm starting with a teal wash. So this is more of a cityscape, and we have a character traveling with a bird, very inspired by an ostrich. Yeah, I just really wanted to do a cool city environment that was a little bit more futuristic. I think I really just nailed the color palette for this one. I'm using mainly different shades of blues and greens, and then very sparingly using red. I think this worked really well to create the atmosphere that I was going for. I must admit, I don't know how accurate the lighting is on this one because, again, I was really just winging it because I didn't have a reference that looked too much like this, but I think the lighting was overall a lot more successful in this piece. This one was really fun because I could add lots of little story elements to the city, shops and restaurants, people selling things on the street. One of the most fun parts was definitely all of these signs. Some of the final things I did were add some smoke and fog effects. And yeah, I was just super happy with how this one turned out in the end. I'm often very scared to paint, especially when I have a sketch that I like, because it's really easy to screw that up and lose the qualities that you like from it. And that was not the case this time around, luckily. In fact, I think this one might have even turned out better than I thought at the beginning. Doesn't happen too often, folks, so when it does, It feels good. Moving into our final day and our final concept art piece. I'm starting this one with a wash of light blue. We're just laying this down to get that background atmospheric color, and then I'll start layering the forest on top of that. So the whole concept for this scene, as I mentioned, was a fall scene, and I just really wanted to have this character standing down a path, perhaps communicating or something with a bird friend. I just thought it would be a really fun one to paint. Mainly, I really wanted to have a lot of those warm fall colors going on and also create a contrast with the background that's more of a cool toned color. A lot of our story elements will be cool toned as well and will contrast and hopefully stand out really nicely by the end. So I did have a lot of practice doing leaves and also the stepping stones from the previous days, but I'm not gonna lie, halfway through this one, I was just not feeling it that much. I liked a lot of the colors, but I felt like I was really struggling with some of the lighting and just making the piece look more like I had wanted it to, so I decided I needed a short brain reset. While I was outside, I was just kind of looking up at the trees and the leaves and trying to observe as much as I could of how the light hit it so that I could take that into the piece and hopefully things would start going better. And I do think that this helped me see things with a little bit of different eyes. So I jumped back in by adding the banners in. Sometimes moving over to another part of the painting and coming back to what you're struggling with later will help you look at the piece in a different way. Then I started blocking in the character as well. I'm just trying to get all of the basic shapes of everything down on the page. I moved down to building out the ground with lots of leaves and tall grass. I just absolutely love when the leaves are falling from the trees and you can smell them as you're walking. It just fills me with so much joy. And I'm really trying to capture some of that in this piece. I don't know how evident that it is, but as with most paintings, once I started to build up more and more details, I started to feel a little bit more confident in the painting and liking the direction it was going. I mentioned this recently in a video, but I think the hardest part of art is being able to continue through the ugly stage, because every single art and craft has one. There will be a point where you are horrified with what your hands have created.
But if you just keep moving, you will come to a better place.
And of course it helps that about 75% of the time, I always have a friend hanging out to encourage me. In this one, I wanted to create a strong section of light in the back, hitting the character from the side. So I put that in with light washes of white in a very selective area. The combo of acrylic paint and the paint markers is, I think, just my favorite thing now. I feel like it sped up the process so much and made so many details so much easier. The Simptap marker pack has a silver and gold marker included, so I thought it would be a nice subtle detail to make all of the constellations stand out. So I went ahead and sparingly added silver over a lot of the banners and also on the character's costume. And the final touch was again adding in some leaves blowing in the wind. And then our final piece was complete. So let's take a look at what we made this week.
Insieme a te sarebbe inutile e non voglio cercarti altrove perché so chi sei. Sei quel 1002 Fiat che è strapazzo di me. La luna, le stelle, la notte, se ne va
overall, really happy with this week. It definitely feels like a step closer in what I would like to be able to do for concept images. Let me know if any of them were your favorites. And thank you so much for spending a little time painting with me. Over on Patreon, there are some additional paintings as requested by patrons that were really, really fun as well. I am so grateful to everyone over on Patreon. It really helps keep the channel going here. And happy fall. It is certainly approaching.
Strapazzo di me